This podcast is about introducing our fans to the animals, plants, and other products that we work with at Josh's Frogs. It's an opportunity to paint a picture of our hobby that is refreshing. We want you guys to be successful with the animals that you're keeping, and we want our hobby to grow ethically and sustainably into the future. Welcome to the Josh's Frogs podcast. Today I'm with Austin. We're going to talk about masked tree frogs. But before we do that, I just want to let you know that the Josh's Frogs podcast is brought to you by Josh's Frogs. We're your one-stop shop for all your reptile and amphibian needs. We're selling only captive bred animals. We are doing lizards, snakes, frogs, toads, axolotls, spiders, tarantulas, all that kind of stuff. We also carry everything you need to take care of those animals. So from the substrates and tanks and lights and heating and all that kind of stuff to all the feeder insects that those animals will eat, as well as all the live plants to make those setups all bioactive. So check us out, joshsfrogs.com. We have blogs, articles, how-to guides, care sheets, a bunch of videos on how to take care of these cool animals. We want you to be successful. Customer service available via phone, email to help you be successful on that. We just really want you to be able to feel confident in how you take care of your animals. So without further ado, we have Austin here. Austin, if somebody hasn't listened to one of your other podcasts, kind of give us a rundown. What do you do here at Josh's Frogs?
So I am the curator of tree frogs and toads. We have more than just tree frogs and toads in my department. We have lots of ground dwelling frogs, mantellas, Solomon Island leaf frogs, tomato frogs, pixie frogs, things like that, which don't really fall into either of those categories, but it's kind of the best grouping that we can think of for now. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to shoot those our way. I'd be interested to hear them. So yeah, and I've done lots of other stuff. I've been in charge of dart frogs in that department before. I've done some of the show coordination stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Talk a little bit about the changes you would like to see in the future when it comes to things that are bred. Like what are some of the animals you'd be like, hey, the hobby needs more of these types of frogs in the future? What would be some of those things that you'd be like, hey, yeah, these should become more staples and more common in our hobby?
It'd probably be anything that's like almost exclusively brought in that's wild caught. So there's a lot of species like that. Adelopus would be really cool.
Yeah.
All of the stubfoot harlequin toads that are down in South America that almost went extinct for a bit there, and then they started rediscovering a bunch of them. I know there are some people in the States working with them that are being fairly successful, so that's exciting. And
Nick Stacey would be one of those.
Yes,
who's had a lot of success with them.
Nick Stacey is one of them. And then I actually just talked to a lady this weekend that got frogs from Nick Stacey and bred them. So
cool.
She got F2 Barbatini out of the water.
Oh, that's cool.
She was showing me pictures, and I was like, "This is so cool."
Yeah. It's cool that we're part of a hobby that cares about that type of stuff and are seeing some changes that way. Cool. All right, tell us what is a masked tree frog? What the heck is that? Like, give us a lowdown. What is that?
So masked tree frogs are true tree frogs. I'm sure at one point or another they were in the genus Hyla, which is
like
all of the tree frogs that you could ever think of were in Hyla. My professor in college called it a trash basket genus, along with like bufo and stuff like that, where it's just like, yeah, just throw everything that climbs a tree or everything that's a toad in one genus, it's fine.
Yeah.
But now they're in the genus Smiliska, and I don't know why it's called Smiliska. And their species name is Phaeota. Also not 100% sure. It probably has to do with the masks that they have.
Yeah.
But they're a neotropical tree frog. They're medium size. They are usually either green or like a nice light brown, kind of like your perfect roasted marshmallow color. And they will change back and forth between that depending on lighting and things like that. So most of the time at night, they're going to be a dark green color to blend in with their surroundings. And during the day, if they're not on a leaf, they're probably going to be brown. but yeah, they try their best to blend into their surroundings. They're called masked tree frogs because of the mask that they have on their face. It goes from basically the tip of their nose all the way to kind of their armpit.
Mm,
Um, and then, yeah, they're pretty much green on the top or brown on the top, depending on light, like I said.
cool. Similarities with some other frogs that are in the hobby. What are they kind of like, and what are they kind of different from?
They're kind of like a tree frog almost.
Yeah.
They're a little bit smaller, less bulky, but they're very, very chill
Yeah.
from our experience. The ones that we have had in captivity for quite a while. As babies, it's understandable. They're pretty flighty. Basically, anything that's picking up a frog in the wild is going to be eating it. They're like at the bottom of the food chain, or just like kind of like right near the bottom,
Mhm.
because I guess they're also eating insects. But um, it's it's a defensive thing for them. They need to get away, or else they're gonna be eaten.
Yeah.
They don't know that we're picking them up just to handle them and not eat them. So it's a good defensive mechanism, but can be kind of annoying when they get away from you. But the adults chill out really nicely, just like the White's tree frogs. But then they're much more neotropical tree frog shaped. So you have more of like the leaf frog kind of thing. So red-eyed tree frogs, and um, kind of more of a pointed nose, less of a rounded snout.
Cool. Cool. Tell us a little bit about how you're setting them up. Like what's the decor look like? What are the things that you're keeping in mind when you're setting them up?
So you can set these guys up almost exactly like red-eyed tree frogs, which is we're transitioning them from um, our quarantine room into that as we get more space in our rooms outside of there. So we're going to set them up just like red-eyed tree frogs are on bioactive. So you have your drainage layer, substrate barrier, um, ABG, or tropical biobedding,
Yeah.
depending on how the keeper feels and what they want to grab, and then sphagnum over top with a bunch of leaf litter and live plants for them to climb on.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Cage size.
18-18-24s for probably a group of, I would say, up to 4. They're a bit bigger, and I would say poopier than red-eyed tree frogs, just in
Poopier.
general.
I love the scientific term. Poopier.
Yes,
Yes.
poopier.
Wow. Talk about feeding. What are you guys feeding to these guys?
As adults, they're able to take large crickets. They're considerably smaller than a lot of the other frogs that we work with when they come out of the water, though. They're probably more akin to like a clown tree frog almost.
Mm.
Maybe a little bit bigger than a clown tree frog. So we put them straight into 10s, though. Feed them 1/8-inch crickets, upgrade them to 1/4-inch crickets, and once they're about an inch, then we start sending them off to people.
Cool. Cool. Talk a little bit about how we acquired some mass tree frogs. What's their current status, and then talk a little bit about them being wild caught and what that means in our hobby.
Yeah. So these guys are pretty regularly available wild caught. They're coming out of places like Panama, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. I don't think they're likely coming out of the southern parts of the range, which
Yeah.
is in like Ecuador and Colombia, but they do exist there. So their range is really large. Um, I want to say Costa Rica might be the northernmost part, but don't quote me on that.
Mhm.
And going kind of all the way through Central America down into the northwestern part of South America. So their least concern, they're not in danger of being like disappearing or anything like that. But they are definitely more often wild caught than captive bred.
Yeah.
The way we acquired them is we are working with a gentleman down in Panama named Sam Sucre, who owns natural tanks, and we have partnered with him to get some of these animals that are very heavily wild caught and just shipped, exported out of their countries of origin. He's captive breeding them at a facility he has in Central America, Panama specifically, and we'll get shipments every so often. A lot of red eyes, a lot of masked tree frogs. We got some really cool fringe leaf frogs as well. But But yeah, the original time, it was a couple years ago now that we got our first batch of mass tree frogs, and we raised them up, and those are the ones that have started to produce captive babies for us now too.
Cool. Talk a little bit about breeding on these guys. Like, how did you know that they were ready, and what did we do with them to get them to lay?
So
Give us
they're
a little.
nice. You can kind of pull their legs away gently from their sides for the females and see that there are eggs inside.
Mhm.
Usually that's a good cue that you can add them to a rain chamber. We breed them very similarly to red-eyed tree frogs, but they don't attach their eggs to like leaves hanging above water in the jungle. They lay their eggs as kind of a film on the surface of the water, and they can lay up to 2,000 eggs at a time.
Wow.
So they are very, very productive. Um, just kind of a comparison back to the White's tree frogs. Very similar in breeding strategy, where you kind of just give them a large surface area of water to lay in. We typically use 40 breeders, and we give them stuff to climb out of the water on, but they don't use that for laying eggs at all. It's kind of just like all out in the water.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool. Now, you said a couple thousand eggs at a
Mhm.
time. How many of those are turning into tadpoles? How many of those are turning into froglets? What are the ratios that you would even expect out of something like that?
So we didn't see very much in the way of bad eggs.
Yeah.
So pretty fertile, um, which is nice. Um, Usually, when you have things like that, you do have to take a portion of the egg clutch and cull it before they start developing into froglets. But I think we got around 400 or
Wow.
so tadpoles, and then probably close to 300 something froglets out of the water. They were pretty stable the entire time, which is nice.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
Mhm.
I love that we're taking a species that can breed really regularly and
Mhm.
breeding that in captivity to alleviate some of the wild caught concerns with
Mhm.
those guys. Go back to kind of the care. We didn't talk about temperature, humidity, similar to red eyes. What is that,
Yes,
and how
similar to
would you
red
do that?
eyes. Um, they are probably a species that needs a little bit more UVB than red-eyed tree frogs. They're usually hanging out on the upper sides of leaves during the day, as opposed to the undersides of
Mhm.
leaves, which is pretty typical of the red-eyed tree frogs. They like to be not as visible. Um, and so just make sure that you're providing UV, and they can kind of regulate how much they're exposing themselves to. And then temperature, very similar to red eyes. They can tolerate down to like 70, 72, with 72 kind of being like our preferred lower range. And then up to the low 80s is tolerable. Just when you get up that high, you have to take into consider evaporation is going to be happening more frequently. And
Yeah.
so just making sure that everything is nice and humid in their enclosure and they're not at risk of drying out.
Cool, cool. Talk about body structure and then some of the plants that you guys would keep with those. Is that a concern? Like I know with whites, it's a big concern. Red eyes, not so much.
Right. Even with red eyes, like we don't want to put anything like the pilea, which are like tiny little leaves that would just get trampled to death. We actually use a lot of the mother-in-law's tongues. I believe Sansevieria, right?
Yep,
I'm not a
Sansevieria.
plant person,
Yep.
so it's some of these names I'm sure I'm butchering. And then you could probably do a pretty mature spathiphyllum, a
Yeah.
peace lily, and that would be able to hold the frogs fairly well. Um, but definitely things that are more have like a trunk. The Dracaena,
Hmm.
those as well
Yep.
work. Um, just something that's not going to just break in
Yeah.
half if a
Yeah.
frog jumps on it.
I really feel like peace lilies are an underrated tree frog plant. I use them with my bicolor,
I
and it
love
can
peace
sustain
lilies.
the yeah yeah
Like it's so versatile.
yeah.
Like I've bred probably like 5 or so species that will lay eggs on the peace lily, ranging from like Pumilio dart frogs to lemur tree frogs to tiger leg tree frogs. Red eyes love them. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, just throw
Yeah.
them in everything.
Yep. Yep. I have them in my paludarium. The roots are just stuck in the water and they
Hmm.
just grow. Yeah,
Yep.
it's kind of cool. Cool. Talk about handling a frog like this. Like how often and what considerations need to be kept in
So when
mind.
you're handling any amphibian, you should be at least rinsing your hands off with just water. It can be sink from the sink. It's okay. Um, and then ideally you would want to be wearing a glove,
Mhm.
which is protecting the frog more so than it is protecting you. These frogs probably have some sort of toxin to their skin. If they're bothered and picked up, they're probably not going to taste the greatest. If
Mhm.
you were to pop it in your mouth, don't do that. I'm not advocating for eating frogs, but if you were to taste them, they would probably taste quite bad to us. Um, so we have oils, and if you have just washed your hands with a fragrance soap or something like that, that's all going to be irritating to the skin of a frog. This species seems to tolerate handling fairly well
Mm.
as adults, so you can pick them up. I've even had them eat while in my hand, kind of just like
Wow.
pick up a single cricket and just hold it in front of their face, and they see it wiggling and they just chomp right down on it, which is always a very fun experience for
Yeah.
somebody who's keeping frogs. So if that's something that you're into, definitely check out the masked tree frogs. They're similar to whites in their behavior as adults, I would say, most comparably to what we're working with.
Cool. Cool. All right. On the range of scale of hard to keep to really easy to keep beginner type, where would you put these guys, and kind of why would you put them in that range?
So I would say they're probably just like the next step from your very, very beginner frog, just
Mm.
because of what you have to do to set them up with the bioactive. Um, Kind of keep them more like the red-eyed tree frogs, which I would put more involved than these. They seem to be a little bit more durable than a red-eyed tree frog, which is always nice. Um, but red-eyed tree frogs aren't. I don't want to besmirch the name of
Yeah.
the red eyes. They're great. They usually do fine for people, but they are a little bit less tolerant to um, like drops in humidity and things
Yeah.
like that. So these guys are fairly easy, but not the absolute easiest frog to keep.
Cool. 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 Any other tips or tricks you want people to keep in mind when keeping masked tree frogs that would help them be successful with those guys when they're keeping them in captivity?
Yeah. So humidity is always the biggest concern that we face with tree frogs. We have a lot of people putting screen tops over their enclosures, and that allows for a lot of airflow.
Yeah.
A really, really easy way to restrict airflow is just covering about half of the screen top. And so you're automatically gaining humidity from that. Live plants are also a great way to do it. Make sure that your
Yep.
drainage layer has a little bit of water to help keep the substrate nice and wet. If frogs are jumping into dry substrate, they're going to get stressed very quickly. And if
Yeah.
they don't have a way to get the substrate off their bodies, they're going to potentially die from that. So
Yeah.
always watch for humidity and make sure that you're keeping up on that.
Yeah. When it comes to humidity, are you providing standing water for
We do give them a water dish,
yeah.
yes. So they can kind of regulate their own um, water intake that way. Um, and that is something that is recommended, I believe, on our website as well
Yeah.
when you're looking at the product page.
Are you seeing them utilize that water dish regularly or semi regularly?
They're usually asleep during the day,
Yeah.
so we're not here when they would be. But there's oftentimes poops and things that a lot of animals like pooping in water because in nature the water is sometimes flowing away from them, and they
Yeah.
don't have to deal with like all of the bacteria buildup that comes
Yeah.
with that. So it's usually a safe avenue to get rid of waste, but
Yeah.
in captivity, we have to be
Yeah.
the
The
way that
movers.
that's
The movers of the
the
poops.
movers of poop. That's essentially what our jobs are.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right. Thanks for helping us out with Mass Tree Frogs. We want to move to a lightning round. I'm going to ask
All
you
right.
some questions. Give us the first thing that comes to your mind
Okay.
when it comes to this. So, we've asked you numerous times if money and space were no issue, what would be your dream pet? So I
Mhm.
want to kind of narrow it down. What's something that's not commonly kept as a pet, but if you just had all this resources, you're on the Austin's ranch and you could keep this type of animal, what would be the coolest animal to keep?
Flying tree frogs, like a lot of the species that are out, like the really, really big ones that need just like an insane amount of height to really keep them well, that
Yeah.
would be a really cool one to keep. So the Rhacophoros, and
Cool.
then whatever species. I know they have a lot of webbing that's different colors. So there's red webs, there's black webs,
Yeah.
there's blue webs, and all those. Um, but they are built to jump out of trees
Yeah.
if they're startled. So that can happen literally at any time.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure, like having a tall greenhouse, I guess, in your house
Yeah.
would be a perfect way to do
Yeah.
that, and have maybe some native Bornean or Indonesian plants that get pretty big to help
Cool.
accommodate them. Would
Cool.
be really cool.
Cool. Give us another business in our hobby that's doing some really cool things, or a breeder that's breeding some really cool animals. Who would you give a shout out to?
Well, we mentioned Nick Stacey already in this
Yes.
podcast. He's doing some pretty cool stuff with the Atelopus. So
Cool.
keep it up.
Cool.
It's awesome.
Cool. We'll get a bunch of people messaging him about when they're going to be available. He'll enjoy that. All right. What was your first pet that you ever had?
Oh, first exotic was a leopard gecko. Yeah, I got my first leopard gecko from Petco when I was like 10 years old.
Mhm.
But before that, it was just your typical dogs. I think my dad had a dog coyote hybrid.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is
Interesting.
probably not like the safest thing, but she was always great. I'm pretty sure not that one, but my mom's dog, which was a Cocker Spaniel, bit me as a baby. So like,
That sounds about right.
but I can't advocate for like getting a
Yeah.
a coyote hybrid dog. It's probably not the greatest idea.
That's awesome. All right. Favorite plant to use in a terrarium when you're talking about tree frogs? What's your favorite one?
We talked about Spathiphyllum, but I'm going to say Pothos because
Yeah.
it's impossible to kill.
Cool. 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 All right. You got an hour of free time. You can do whatever the heck you want. What's the newest hobby / way to relax for Austin right now?
You know, it's getting to be spring. I'm probably going to go out and walk around and flip logs in the woods.
Yeah. Look for some salamanders.
Look for some salamanders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Last question. You've answered this quite a few times, but got a piece of advice that you give to people as they're listening to you.
Adequately water your frogs
Mhm.
if you're keeping them. That's our number one issue that we run into with people trying to keep frogs for the first time, is just they're not misting enough. Their substrate isn't wet enough.
Yeah.
They're not covering their screen enough.
Yeah.
Is just a lot of preventative stuff that you could do just by making sure that your frogs have enough water.
Cool. Cool. Thank you, Austin, for educating us on mass tree frogs and helping us take care of those better. Appreciate that. Austin's a staple at Josh's Frogs. You see him in a lot of videos. He's written a lot of stuff for us. Check out some of his stuff, even on Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives and TikToks and all those kinds of things as well, too. So check him out on that. So thanks again, Austin, and have a great day. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoy this content and want to stay up to date, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us across social media. We always want to bring you the best content, so let us know what you think in the comments. And for all your reptile and amphibian needs, be sure to check us out at joshsfrogs.com. We have an amazing selection. Until next time, stay curious, stay froggy, and keep exploring.